We're now on Daf Daled Amud Beis, and the Gemara is going to try to now bring a proof to support Rav Sheshes that Halach is potter from Shvuas Modem Miktas. And this proof is based on a sugya called Sloim Dinrim, and the Brisa is addressing the case of a shtar. So that the malva produces a shtar against the loaf. The problem is that the shtar doesn't tell us how many sloim or how many dinrim the lova had borrowed from the malva. Now, our principle is that we always take the minimum. And therefore, until we know otherwise, we assume that the shtar testifies about alva on 2 dinrim, or 2 sloim. The malva is claiming that it's much more. Now, the lova has 2 choices. He could either go down to 2, and then, in effect, he has the shtar to support him, because we assume the shtar is on 2. But if he goes beyond 2, that's called Meshav Aveda. That's the famous Shita Rabbi Akiva. He's like giving a gift to the malva. Because really, he should have claimed 2. He could have claimed 2. Sloim dinrim malva omer chamesh v'lova omer shalosh. So again, automatically, when the lova adds that 3rd dinar, going above the minimum of 2 in a shtar, he's a meshav aved. But nevertheless, Rabbi Shimon Elazar omer hol v'hodu miksa tiny shava. Rabbi Eliezer is going. Rabbi Shimon Elazar, is going to apply the general principle of modu mikzas. The malva is demanding 5. The lova admits to 3. He's a modu mikzas. What would be if the lova admitted to 2? L'chorah, he should also be chayav shvu. And then we don't know why Rabbi Shimon Elazar is mentioning dafka the case where the lova admits to 3. But in any event, Rabbi Kiva Omer Eino El Kamesh Avedu Potter. He's giving a gift. He's offering a 3rd dinar out of the goodness of his heart. That gives him a great migu. He could, if he was a liar, he would have said 2. Unless you assume a rumi kara'arem, which the Gemara is going to raise, that maybe he said 3 in order to try to fool the judges and make himself look like an honest guy, but really he owes 5. Why does Rab Shimon ben Elazar imply that had the lova claimed 2, he'd be parted from a shvuah? Because Rab Shimon ben Elazar says he's only chayav shvuah as a moed mikzas because he said 3. Why? If he said 2, he's also moed mikzas. The only answer could be halach. We have to apply the ruling of Rav Sheshes that halach is part from a shvuah. Now, why, if the lova would have said 2, is that called halach? The answer is because a shtar is kagavui dam. It's as if it was collected, and he certainly could collect 2 from this shtar that says slaim or dinrim in the plural. And the Gemara rejects it low. Hi, the Ketani Shalosh, you're right. Even in the case where the lova had said, I only owe you 2, which we said is halach because of the power of the shtar, nevertheless, we're holding now like Reb Chia, and halach is chayav shvuas moder mikzas. So why did Reb Shimon Elazar mention 3? He wants to show you that I disagree and reject the principle of Rabbi Akiva, Meshav Aveda, and there's only Meshav Aveda if he adds that 3rd dinar or that 3rd selah above and beyond 2. Even though he admitted to a 3rd selah, which makes him into a Meshav Aveda, nevertheless, he still is included in the category of Moed Mikzas, and he takes a shvu. Ihachi, says the Gemara, if that be the case, Reb Shimon Elazar Omer Hol v'Hodu Mikzat Taina Yishava, why did Rav Shimon Elazar use the words that he was modu mixas? Af zei mi boile. Of course he was modu mixas. The chiddush of Rav Shimon Elazar by adding the third dinar of his hodah is that even though he's a Meshav Aved, he's still considered a modu mixas. So he should have said, Hoi af zei shava. He should have said. So now at this point, based on this last objection, the Gemara assumes that according to Rav Shimon Elazar, in a case where he admits only two, he's not chayav shvua. But not because of Halach. El Yolam Shtayim Potur Ve'el Chayiv. Halach would be chayav. We accept Reb Chia Bas Raisa. Shiny Hachad the Commissary Leishtara. The reason why the Love, if he only admits to two, is Potur from Shvuas Mod Mixes, has nothing to do with Halach, but because the Shtar supports it. And if a Nitba has two Eidim to support his claim, like for example, Ruvain says to Shimon, you owe me 100. Shimon says, in return, I owe you 50. And he brings Eidim that he owes him 50. In such a case, he doesn't have to take a shvu. Inami, the Gemara offers another explanation. Why would it be that if, in Reb Shimon Elazar's framework, he had conceded to two and not to three, he would be potter from a shvuas modu miktas? Has nothing to do with halach. In fact, it has nothing to do with the support that he has from the shtar, but rather mishum davi shtar shibud karkos v'einishban al shibud karkos. In other words, if there's a taina on karka and then he was kofir the other half of the taina on karka, so it's his hodah on karka that should generate a shvua. We have a principle einishban al shibud karkos. Ika de mosiv mi seifa. Now, Ika the Mosiv Misefa means we're going to take this entire brisa that we studied about Sloim Dinrim, and we're going to bring a proof for Reb Chia turning everything upside down against Rav Sheshes. Rabbi Kiva Omer Eino El Kamesh Ravedu Potter. So why does Rabbi Kiva say he's Potter from a shvua of Modu Miktas? Because he has this super duper migu like a Mesh Raveda. Time of the Omer Shalosh. Shtaim Chayav. Wait a minute. How can he be Chayav Shvuas Modu Mixas if he admits on two when we said that Halach is Potter and Shtar is like Halach? For Shtar, the Komodu be Halachu, Halach Domin, Shmamin Halach Chayav, we should prove Rab Chia. Lo, Gemara rejects it. Liola Memelcha Shtaim Nami Potter. Rabbi Akiva mentioned Sholosh, but he really never meant to differentiate between Shtayim and Sholosh. And he'd be potter from Shvu even in the case of Shtayim, presumably because of Rav Shesh's logic, and the Shtar is Halach. So why did Rabbi Akiva mention three? Haidik Toni Sholosh, Afukim and Rav Shimon Elazar, the Omodu Mixatayna Havi V'chayav. Right, Rav Shimon Elazar is going to apply the principle, the general rule of Modu Miksatayni Yishava, and Rabbi Akiva wants to disagree with him. And it could be that in the case of Shtaim, everybody would agree upon it because of Rav Shesh's logic of Halach. But the machlokus is going to be where he admits to three. And whereas Rabbi Akiva accepted the principle of Kaveshim Avena is potter from Shvuas Modu Miktas, Rabbi Shimon Elazar rejects it. Kamash Malishim Avenu potter. Hachinami Mistama. The Isal Kedaitach Shtayim Chayav. If you're going to assume, like Reb Chia, that even though a shtar is halach, in the case where he's moded to Shtayim, he takes the Shuas Modu Miktas, V'sholosh Hechi Potler Rabbi Akiva. The whole logic of Kamesh Vaveda, of giving him credibility of Rabbi Akiva, goes down the windpipe, down the drain. Because now you're telling me that had he admitted to two, he'd be chayav, is haya rumi kama arin sovar, right? The whole thing is a scheme. He realizes that he's in a trade-off situation. What's worse of these two options? Adding another dinar and paying 3 instead of 2, or saving himself the third dinar, but he's going to have to take the shvuah. Ema shalosh. I'm going to say 3. He knows that by adding an extra hodah and extending his hodah to the third, he now becomes a Meish Vavedi, pots himself from shvuah. But had he said only 2, okay, he'd be believed, but dafka shvuah, he doesn't want to take the shvuah. El shma mino shtayim nami potur. So now at the bottom line of this whole sugya, a love who is modon 2 doesn't have to take a shvuah. Elakasha de Rav Chia, shiny hasav de komisayel eshtara. We're going to use the same old logic that the reason why in the case of Shtayim, Rav Shimon Elazar would say he doesn't take a shvuah is not because of Rav Shesh's reasoning of Halach, but because the shtar supports his claim of 2. Another possibility. Mosiv Mar Zutra Bereder of Nachman. Mar Zutra asks the following question on Rav Sheshes. Okay, now we're going to learn a Mishnah in Masechet Shavuos on Daf Lamed Ches Amid Beis. Now, just the background information for this Mishnah in Shavuos is that you can have one taina officially, but it really is made up of 2 different tainas. For example, the plaintiff puts forth a taina against the defendant of kalim and karka. You owe me both kalim and karka. So technically it's one taina. But these are 2 different worlds. There's kalim and there's karka. So what is the issue that we're addressing here? If he's mod on kalim, is that called modu v'miktsas? Because he denies karka? Or the other way around, let's say he's mod on karka and he denies kalim. Is that called modu v'miktsas? Tanu kalim v'karkos, hodu v'kalim v'kofar v'karkos. I admit that I owe you these utensils; they belong to you, but I deny that I stole your property, your real estate. Or the other way around, hodu v'karkos, v'kofar v'kalim. He admits that this land is stolen; it belongs to you, but I never took any kalim from you. Is patur. He doesn't take a shvuah. And the simple explanation is because there are 2 separate tainas. There's one taina on kalim, one taina on karkos. So there's no modu v'miktsas. Hoda. Now the Mishnah continues. Hoda mixas karkos. Otter mixas kalim chayav. So let's go backwards. Mixas kalim is chayav because that's classic modu v'miktsas. Unless you introduce halach, as we'll soon see. So vis-a-vis the claim against the defendant on kalim, the defendant was modu v'miktsas. But if, on the other hand, he was modu v'miktsas on karkos, we have a principle of ein nishban ala karkos. And therefore, miktsas karkos potur, miktsas kalim chayim. So the Gemara says, time of the kalim v'karkos, the reason why he's potur from a shvuah in the case of kalim and karkos is the karka lav bas shvuahi. The implication is ha-kalim v'kalim, dumya the kalim v'karkos. Okay, so this dumya is going to give us halach. In other words, we're talking about a case where you claim I owe you 2 utensils. and I say, here's one of them. I don't owe you another one. That's called halach, and that's dumya the karka, because karka is always halach. Hechidami lav diamale halach, where the defendant said to the plaintiff, here, take this kli, it's your kli, I don't owe you another kli. Ushmamina halach chayah. And yet, the Mishnah, by implication, indicates that he would have to take a shvuah in a case of kelim v'kelim, that a dumya the kelim v'karka. Look, the olamei melacha, kelim v'kelim nami pot. In truth, even in a case of kelim v'kelim, he's potter if it's dumya the karkos, namely it's halach. Ahai diktoni kelim v'karka, kamash malon, hodu mixes kelim chayev, af ala karkos. And this is called Gilgal Shvuah. In other words, that once he's chayev for mixes kelim, just 1 second. Just want to make sure I get the mathematics here. Again, who do we wanted to prove that even though it's what? Even though kelim is dumya the karka is halach, nevertheless he's chayev shvuah. No. The Gemara is saying that kelim, if it's dumya, the karkos, and it's halach, you're potter from a shvuah. So why did the Mishnah say that kelim and karkos is what is potter from a shvuah? Amash malon hodu mixes kelim chayiv afal karkos. Now the chiddush of the Mishnah was that in the case of kelim and karkos, even though he was chayiv amodu mixataina a shvuah on kelim, he can now be megalgal on to karkos. Michael mashmal and zokin. Zokin is the same as gilgal shvuah. Tanina. We have in a Mishnah, Zokin, so we know this principle of Gilgal Shvuah onto Karkos. But by the way, in Lumdus, that means that Karka is not Mufka from a Shvuah, it's Potter from a Shvuah. But if there's already a Chiyuv through Gilgal Shvuah, then you can't take a Shvuah, and you will take a Shvuah on Karka. So why did the Mishnah have to repeat what we already have in a Mishnah of Zokikin? Hacha ikar v'hasam agav groya nasba. That the Mishnah Shvuas is the primary source for the halacha of Gilgal Shvuah. Here, it's coming in through the back door, so to speak. Because the topic of Masechet Shvuas is Shvuos, whereas the Mishnah Kiddushin is dealing with Kinyanim. So the fundamental principle of Gilgal Shvuah belongs to Masechet Shvuas. In Kiddushin, it's only mentioned Agav Urcha, so to speak. I mean, in Masechet Kiddushin, really the subject is Kinyani Karka, Kinyani Metaltalin. So Agav Urcha, he comes in with Zokikin. So we'll just read, the first few lines on Daf Hey, which is tomorrow's Daf. Every case of karka, by definition, is halach. Because when I admit to you that this karka belongs to you, I've in effect given it to you. It was always yours. It was always stationary one location. So why do you need a principle of ein nishban al karkos? Ke'ilu the karka is mafkir the shvuah. Forget about that. Every case of karka is halach. All right, so Mirza Hashem, that's where we'll pick it up tomorrow. And you'll let me know your schedule.